You may be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor will again be given to the prosecution to continue putting questions to this witness. You may proceed. Simon King, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Give and allow me to continue my questioning to you. After Hu Nums was arrested, were those people from his own network were also arrested? Response. After Hu Nums' arrest, those who worked in that ministry were successively removed. People from my section were also removed. Question. Did you know whether the wife and the children of Hu Num also disappeared? Response. His family also disappeared, but I did not know whether they disappeared at the same time as he disappeared or at a later stage. Question. Did you know Hu Num's wife? Response. I saw her, but I did not know her name. Thank you. According to your written record with the investigator of the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges, that is document E3/438, you stated that after Hu Num was arrested and those who participated in the training sessions with me were successively removed as well. It is on EN in Khmer at 00373433 and in English 00375873 and in French 00426480. How did you know that there were arrests of those staff working at the propaganda ministry after the arrest of Hu Num? Response. What I knew is that after Hu Num was arrested, successive arrests were made for those staff working in the ministry. Particularly for my group, there was only me remaining. Of course, I did not know where they were removed to. Amongst those people who attended the training session with me, only I remained. Thank you. Also, in the same document, that is document E3/438, EN in Khmer is at 00373433, in English 00375874, and in French 00426431, says the prosecutor. You spoke about the arrest of some people, including a person by the name of Saul. Can you tell us who Saul was? Response. Saul and all had been at the ministry before I arrived. So I was kind of a newcomer, and I was assigned to work with all, and Saul was in charge of the broadcasting section. And later on, when Hunam was arrested, a bit later, Saul was also removed. And in fact, there was only one person remaining at Saul's section, and at my section, only I remained. And I knew that only one person remained at Saul's section because I knew that person, and his name was Ted. And I knew that Ted came from Swiria. That's all I knew. Thank you. With Your Honor's permission, I'd like to bring on the screen the list of prisoners questioned on the 18th April 1978, document IS 16/109 0003 9907 in Khmer, English 0074 6762, and in French 0071 0269. That document shows that one of the prisoners were Ching Sru alias Saul. This is to refresh the witness memory, Mr. President. President, yes, you may proceed. Thank you. Mr. Witness, in this document entitled List of Prisoners at S21, dated 18th April 1978, amongst those names, one person named Bun Ching Sru alias Saul, and he was the group chief of teleprinter at K33. Is this the person named Saul that you said disappeared from that ministry? Response. I cannot say whether this is the same person or not, because I do not know his native name. I only knew that he had worked there before me, and he was known as Saul, and he was in charge of that teleprinter, but I could not say what happened to him after he was removed. Thank you. The person, the name Saul, as you stated, did he also work at that office K33? Response. The person by the name of Saul that I knew worked in that office as well. Thank you. Now I move on to another topic regarding the role of Nuon Chea. Did you ever see or meet with Nuon Chea during the time that you worked at the propaganda ministry? Response. I met Noon Chie and I knew about him as he went to that place. Thank you. Question. When was the first time that you met with Noon Chie, if you can recall? Response. I did not meet with him at any specific place. However, in the morning, I would see him coming to see what's going on at my section. But I could not know the nature of his work, and I did not have any official contact with him or spoke through him. But sometimes I sent documents to him, but besides that, there was no other contact with him. Thank you. When Noon Chie brought the document in, what kind of documents, if you could recall? Response. I do not know what I shall respond to you when you ask Noon Chie brought the document in. Question. You just told the chamber that you met with Noon Chie, though not frequently, and sometimes Noon Chie brought the document in. Can you recall what kind of documents that he brought in? Or what were the content of those documents, if you can recall? President, witness, please wait. International Counsel for Noon Chie, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the English translation, the witness seemed to say that it was the witness who sent documents to Noon Chie, so to not avoid the witness. If that is indeed what he also said in Khmer, that should be reflected in the question.
Prosecutor, Mr. President, in order to clarify this issue, may I allow your permission to allow the witness to speak again on this issue? President, you need to put your question precisely. What are you trying to get at? Prosecutor, previously the witness stated that he met with Noon Chie and that Noon Chie brought the document in, but I'd like to clarify whether it was Noon Chie who brought the documents in, or brought the documents to him or to any person. So my question to you, Mr. Witness, that you just told the chamber that Noon Chie brought the document in. To which section or to which group did he bring the document? Response. I do not understand your question that I spoke or said anything about the document. Because I did not say it to that nature, and how could you hear me saying that? Because I did not know what you heard, and then you put the question to me that Noon Chie brought the documents in. But I cannot recall of what as to what did I respond to you? Prosecutor, the question is, did Noon Chea bring any documents to your workplace? Response. Regarding any of the documents of his, I had no knowledge. But I myself took the printout to him. That is, the information from my section was sent to him to take measure, but there was no document referred back from upper level to my section. That's how I responded. Thank you. Question. You also told the chamber that Noon Chea went in the morning to your section. Did he go to your section or to other sections, and what was he doing then? Response. He had his separate workplace where I did not know, but he came to see my section in the morning. When he came in, he just looked around and asked whether we had already eaten, something like that, and then he would just go. So sometimes he came to look at where I worked, look at the bedroom, or look at the kitchen. That's how I saw him. Question. Can you recall in what position did he hold when he went to see your section? Response. I only knew that after the removal of Hunam, Junyat came to replace him. And after Junyat, Noon Chea came to replace her. So I could not know for sure regarding his position. I did not know whether that kind of position was in any official document. And I heard on the radio that he was a member of the standing committee. And only when he came to my workplace that I knew it was him. Thank you. Question. Did you know, besides his role as a member of the standing committee, did he have any role at the Ministry of Propaganda? Response. I did not grasp his position when he came, or in what capacity, or that he was in charge of the ministry at all. But in the morning, every morning he arrived, but I did not know whether he was in charge of the whole ministry. I did not learn of that information at the time. Question. Regarding his workplace at the ministry, did he have his office in that ministry? Response. There was no proper office, but he had his working place. He would sit there, or sometimes he would walk around a little bit, but it was open, so there was no proper closed office of his. Questioned. Does it mean that his office was also within the compound where your section was? Response. The building was huge. Of course, there were many rooms, and he was working in that building as well. And there were other working groups within that building as well. But my section was separate from that building, although it was within the compound of the ministry. Thank you. Questioned. During that time, did Nunchi organize a political training session or a study session at all? Response. As for the political study session, it's part of the profession if you work with the revolution. So there was always a political study session. And what was practiced previously before his arrival continued to practice when he arrived. Questioned. Can you recall whether you participated in any political study session held by or chaired by Nuon Chea? Response. If I did, there would be very few. There were no major meetings. It could be meetings for the relaying of instructions or to reiterate the previous instructions, but they were not major. And sometimes he would speak directly to the person to relay his instructions. Thank you. In your written record of interview with the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges, you stated that when Nuon Chea arrived, they instructed not to speak about the 17 April people or the new people and the old people. That is, in your document is 3/438 at 00373436 in Khmer, and in English 00375875, and in French 00426433. Did you know the reason for the prohibition of making a distinction between the old and the new people? Response. I did not analyze that issue, but at that time he instructed not to speak about the 17 April people or the new people, or that people at the base were referred to as the old people. So his instructions were to try to reduce the use of these words. But that's all I knew, and nothing more than that. Thank you. Also in your response, that is E3/438 at EIN in Khmer 00373435, in English 00375875, and in French 00426432, says the prosecutor. You stated that there was a theory that, quote, do whatever it takes to cleanse all the traitors from the rank, end of quote. Can you tell us who actually introduced this saying? Response. As I can recall, it was from the time when Junyat came to take charge. Thank you. During the time of the meetings with Nuon Chea, did Nuon Chea speak about the traitors or the enemy at all? Response. I cannot recall whether he talked about it or not, or if he did, that I cannot recall. Because my memory does not serve me that well. But it was likely that he did not speak much about that. Or maybe I just simply cannot recall it. For that reason, I cannot respond to your question. Question. Regarding the study sessions or the meetings outside the Ministry of Propaganda, did you attend any of those meetings or study sessions? Response. Besides the ones held at the ministry that I worked, I did not attend any other meeting or study session. Question. Regarding the criticism and self-criticism meetings held within the Ministry of Propaganda, were such meetings held frequently? Response. During that regime, there was a daily meeting, and there were another meeting held about every 10 days. And usually that kind of meeting was about the criticism and self-criticism. And the daily meeting was about the work production. Question. Regarding the daily meeting, who actually attended those meetings and who chaired or led that meeting? Response. As for the daily meeting, it was the chief of the department who chaired the meeting. And the meeting was about how much we achieved for that day. So we reported it through the meeting. And the meeting that was held every 10 days was about criticism and self-criticism. Thank you. Regarding that later meeting that was held every 10 days, usually who actually chaired the meeting? Response. The criticism and self-criticism meeting was usually chaired by the chief of the group, or sometimes they were chaired by the chief of the section. And for my section, it will be held by my section, and we will criticize the staff members within that section. And for other sections, they would do the same. Thank you. Question. Did you know the purpose of criticism and self-criticism? Response. I personally knew that the meeting, as instructed from the upper echelon, should be held so that greater production achievement could be made. So that was the purpose of the meeting, to strengthen the work production and our personal political status, to strive to work more efficiently with the works assigned. Thank you. Question. In that criticism meeting, did anyone ever confess about their bad quality? And if so, what were the measures taken against that person? Response. Regarding the criticism and self-criticism meeting, it was mainly about the cleansing of ourselves, to make ourselves clean. I mean, we did that by confessing to other people. Of course, there has to be reaction to any of that kind of confession. People would feel upset after being criticized, and that person shall be corrected himself. Because we would also rely on a theory that we ourselves could not see our own mistakes, and that it can only be reflected by other people. And for that reason, we shall be criticized and we shall improve ourselves. So we put ourselves in a position to be criticized, but we could also criticize other participants of the meeting. Thank you. You told the chamber that when there was a confession of mistakes, the person will be criticized for improvement. How the process was conducted? Response. I did not know about the major mistakes, but for minor mistakes, as we were working together, we would say it face to face to one another. And if somebody made a mistake without following the instructions, that person will be considered as liberal. And it means that person violated the discipline as failed, and that person fails to adhere to the instructions. So that was the nature of the criticism and self-criticism meeting. Thank you. What about those who violated the instructions and were considered liberal? What measures will be taken against those liberal people?
Response. Based on my experience, those who obeyed the instruction continue to comply with the instruction, but there were people who took the liberal stance, and they had liberal ideas, and they did not listen to others. And during the criticism and self-criticism sessions, we kept advising each other. That's what I noticed in my workplace, but I did not really understand what action were taken against them. To be precise, but normally it was an internal self-criticism within our section. Question. You told the court earlier on that there were people who brought up the shortcomings of other members of your section, and you also mentioned that the mass also brought up the shortcomings of the section. So when you were mentioning the mass, who did you refer to? Response. Mass, the mass in this context, based on my experience, it referred to the party and the youth league. I am a member of the masses, but I was an ordinary member of the mass. I was not placed under any organized leadership. And later on, we were incorporated into the internal force. Question. In your testimony before the Office of Co-Investigating Judges, you said on a monthly basis the magazines were sent to your section. It's document E3/438 Khmer ERN 0032 34 35, English ERN 00 375875, French 00 426432. When the magazines was distributed to your section, did you know the underlying reason for sending this magazine to your section? Response. As a matter of fact, the magazines were sent to our section, and I also mentioned that in my interview. I actually did not know the reason for sending those magazines to us. And at that time, I did not have much time to read the magazines because I were assigned with a lot of tasks. There were a lot of backlogs in my section, so I had to handle the tasks on a day-to-day basis. I did not read the magazine, but I only knew that the magazine was circulated to my section and we store them, but I did not pay much attention to the magazines because what I focused on at that time was my main duty. Question. On a separate point, you also mentioned to the investigator of the OCIJ that Office 870 was the office of the center, and it was the place where the senior leaders worked. It was in document E3/438, Khmer ERN 00373435. English 00375875, French 00426432. My question on this point is that you said that this office 870, belonged to the senior leaders. How did you know that? Response. I have already answered this question, but I would like to clarify that I knew about that from my friends, and I did not actually know the exact whereabouts of this office. I learned it from my friends, and I heard it from the friend telling me that that was the place where the senior leaders work, and that was all about it. Prosecutor, Mr. President, I do not have any further question for the witness in question, and I would like to now hand over to my esteemed colleague.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Keevan. My name is Dale Lysak. I'm also with the Office of Co-Prosecutors, and I have just a few more questions for you this morning. I first wanted to ask you to go back to the 1974 time period when you were a militiaman or soldier in Kampong Leng district. At that time, did you hear, were you aware of the battle at which Udong was captured by the revolutionary forces?
Response. In 1974, we had to go back a little bit to 1974. At that time, I knew about it, but it was not in a systematic manner because I heard it from others. I was actually residing in the forest, and I only heard it from messengers, and it was the words of mouth from one person to another that Udong was conquered by the revolutionary forces. That was what I knew at that time, but the details of this victory was not known to me.
Did you hear what happened to the residents of Udong after it was captured by revolutionary forces in 1974?
กองกำลัง
Response: The revolutionary forces which conquered Odong was something that I did not know in detail because I was at that time residing in my home village, and Odong and my village were rather far from each other, so I did not know the details of that.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Let me turn now to another subject that you've discussed with my colleague this morning. You indicated that there were evacuees from Kampong Chhnang provincial town who arrived in your home village or commune. Can you tell us when those evacuees arrived? Was there any effort made to determine whether any of them were connected to the Lon Nol regime? In other words, whether they or their relatives were soldiers or officials of the Lon Nol regime?
I would like to respond to this question as follows. Actually, the evacuees were sent to the cooperatives of the commune, and I was actually in the military division. I was not connected with the people at the time, and my unit was also tasked to build dam and dikes as well. So those new evacuees were incorporated into cooperatives. And as for my company, we had to build dams and dikes as assigned by the upper authority. And as for new evacuees, I did not know much about them.
Let me turn now to the period that you worked at the Ministry of Propaganda. You told my colleague that when news was printed out of the machine that you monitored, that you would take those printouts to another section. What was the section that you delivered the printouts to?
The printout from the printing machine could have been in multiple copies, and we delivered to others, but I did not know where else these printouts were circulated. It was beyond my knowledge, but I sent to a place where they received these printouts from me.
And you told my colleague that you worked in shifts. My follow-up question is, were you instructed by your superior that someone had to monitor the machine at all hours of the day and night? Was that an instruction that you received from your superior at the Ministry of Propaganda?
Response. There were my supervisor who arranged the schedules for us. a man by the name of Ol who supervised the place arranged the shift for staff members in my section.
And based on the shifts schedule that you received from Ol, is it correct that someone was tasked to monitor the machine both day and night?
Response. In the administration of the internal working procedures at that time, they asked me to keep our eyes on the machine to ensure that it was not stuck, so that the copies were printed properly. So it was the arrangement of the upper authority who wanted the printout to be smooth without any disruption. So we had to keep our eyes on the machine all the time.
Thank you. You also told my colleague that when Nuon Chea was at the ministry, that you sometimes took printouts to him. Were the printouts that you took to Nuon Chea, were these printouts of news from the machine that you monitored?
Response. The printouts I sent to the other sections were the documents printed from the machine. There was no any other documents beside the document printed from the printing machine, and I delivered to the other section who were responsible for circulating to other places.
My question was, are these the same documents that you took to Nuon Chea when he started coming to the ministry?
Response. I sent only few documents to Nuon Chea. I would not deny that I never sent a document to Nuon Chea, but there were few, because at that times, as I mentioned in my testimony earlier, that there was another section responsible for distributing the printouts. I only delivered few printouts to Nuon Chea. And as I said, I did send this document to Nuon Chea, but there are few because there was another section responsible for distributing this printout to other intended recipients.
On those few occasions, who was it that instructed you to take those printouts to Nuon Chea?
Response. I would like to add that actually there was no any direct instruction from anyone. If I met him, then I would hand it in to him. But if there were people who came to receive the printout, I would give the printout to those receivers. There were only few instances when there were no people who came to receive the copies, so I handed them in directly to Nguyen Chia.
Thank you for clarifying that. My last question for you is, could you tell us what time period or when was it that, when during the Democratic Kampuchea period was it that Nguyen Chia started coming to the Ministry of Propaganda?
Response. Nguyen Chia came to take charge of Office K33. I did mention the date when he came to be in charge of this office in my interview as well, but to be precise, he came here when Vietnamese troops fought their way into Cambodia. So when after Hun Nam was arrested, then Jun Jat came to take his place. And then when Vietnamese troops came in Cambodia, it was in 1979, then Nguyen Chia came to take the place of Jun Jat. I do not recall the exact date, but that's what I can recall. It was first led by Hun Nam, and then in late 1977, Jun Jat came to take his place. And then it was in 1979 when the Vietnamese troop came in, Nguyen Chia came to be in charge of this ministry.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. On behalf of the Office of Co-Prosecutors, we want to thank you for answering our questions this morning. Mr. President, we have no further questions.
The President. Now I hand over to the lead co-lawyers for the civil party to put the questions to the witness. You may proceed. Mr. Pech Ong. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honors. On behalf of the civil party lead co-lawyers, I would like to hand over to Counsel Lao Chun Thi and lawyer Benny Ye to put the questions to the witness. The President, yes, you may proceed. Lawyer Lao Chun Thi. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honors. Good morning to everyone in the courtroom, and good morning to members of the public in the public gallery and those who are observing the proceeding on the video connection. Good morning, Mr. QN. I would like to put a few questions to you in relation to what you witnessed and experienced. My first question to you relates to the fact of the evacuation of people out of the city and towns. Earlier on, members of the prosecution did ask you a question about this evacuation, but I would like to seek clarification from you whether or not you knew the main reasons for the evacuation of people, in particular out of Phnom Penh. Response. If you ask me whether or not I knew any motive, in-depth motive of the evacuation of people out of Phnom Penh, it's beyond my knowledge. As I responded to the questions at that time, when Phnom Penh was conquered, I was still in the countryside. I only learned the news of the victory from others. I heard that there were evacuations of people, but as for the underlying motive of the evacuation was not made known to me. And I only noticed at that time that even people who lived in the provincial towns were also evacuated to the countryside. I did not even know that there were evacuation out of Phnom Penh, but I knew that there were people coming from the provincial towns. Question. You mentioned in your testimony earlier on this morning that you were transferred to Phnom Penh. Do you recall when exactly you arrived in Phnom Penh? Response. They transferred me to Phnom Penh, and I did answer this question earlier. It was in late 1975 or early 1976. I do not recall the exact date, but when I first arrived in Phnom Penh, I was placed in one of the buildings near the Royal Palace, and it was sometime during the end of rainy season, because I could feel the breeze blowing from the northeastern part of the country, so it could have been late 1975 or early 1976. Question. So when you arrived in Phnom Penh for a short period of time, you were admitted to the Ministry of Propaganda and Information. Did you receive any particular training before you were admitted to this ministry? Response. When I came to Ministry of Propaganda and Information, I was trained with technical aspects, purely technical aspects. At that time, they trained us how to use teleprinters. And teleprinting's office were divided into several sections, namely receiving section, repairing section, typewriting section, and broadcasting section. So my function at that time was in the section of typewriting repair. And then later on, I was also in charge of catching information. They actually train us how to use teleprinters for 3 months in series, and then we had to practice it for 3 months as well. So at that time, I focused on this technical aspect because we wanted to ensure that the work could be done. That's why we had to learn to master the skills. So overall, there were 3 months of technical training and another 3 months for practicum. Question: who were the trainers in the training course you attended? Response: as for the trainers in the courses I attended were the Chinese. They were sent from China. Question: so how long did those trainers train you? Was it 3 months or 6 months? Response: those trainers were dispatched to Cambodia to provide training for 6 months. They taught us theoretical frameworks of that as well as the practice. Question: how many students were there in the training course you attended, and where were they from? Response: the trainees at that times were from different places, but as I said, the trainings were even divided into different sections as well. But in my class, there were around 10 to 15 students. I do not recall the exact numbers of trainees in my course, but there was in the range of 10 and 15 trainees in each class. The President: thank you, lawyers, and thank you, witness. The time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn from now until 1:30 this afternoon. Court officer, please facilitate with the other official to ensure that the witness has a proper place to rest during the break, and have him back to this courtroom before 1:30. International Counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Nguyen Chia is suffering from a headache, back pain, and a lack of concentration, and would like to follow this afternoon's proceedings from his holding cell, and we have prepared the waiver.
The Chamber notes the request by Mr. Nguyen Chia through his defense counsel to follow the proceeding remotely through audio-visual link for the remainders of today's proceedings due to his health reason. The request by Nguyen Chia is appropriate, and we grant the request for Mr. Nguyen Chia to follow the proceeding from the holding cell downstairs for the remainder of today's proceeding. He has expressly waived his right not to be present directly in this courtroom. However, the Chamber requires the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to submit the Chamber the letters of waivers with the thumbprint or signature by Mr. Nguyen Chia. And AV assistants are instructed to connect the audio-visual link into the holding cell downstairs so that Mr. Nguyen Chia can follow the proceeding from the holding cell for the remainder of today's proceedings. Security guards are instructed to bring the co-accused to the holding cell downstairs where the audio-visual equipment is connected for Mr. Nguyen Chia to follow the proceedings this afternoon, and Mr. Kyu Sampon is to be brought to this courtroom before 1:30. The court is now adjourned.